Hello everyone, wanted to talk a little bit more about my progress in terms of aerial combat wargaming. So about a month ago I put up a video talking about a relatively new set of rules that have come out called RA3646. A German company produce some absolutely beautiful 1/200th scale models of World War II aircraft. As the name implies, it's from 1936 to 46, so it covers pre-war aircraft and through to a kind of hypothetical period when World War II might have continued, and the type of planes that were under development but never actually got produced by the war's end that might have seen combat in 1946. So I have painted up, as you can see, three models from Air Raid 3646, which are the Grumman Wildcats, and the decals on them are from an associated enterprise, Seven Swabian decals, which are also a German company, and they make decals to match some of the models that Air Raid 3646 bring out. Really happy with these particular models. The way I am going though is that these models have definitely got me back into aerial combat war games. So I've got very enthused about that over the last few weeks and been painting up a lot more that you'll see in a moment. But I'm not so sold on the rules themselves. They're hex-based rules. I have purchased one mat. Again, I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the mats and so on shortly. But I have purchased one hex-based mat, but I've now decided that I still much prefer my favourite set of rules, lacquered coffins, to play aerial combat during the Second World War. The Air Raid 3646 rules are not bad, they're pretty good. They're probably, I would say, better than Check Your Six. I can't compare them to Blood Red Skies because I've never played Blood Red Skies and don't have any real inclination to do so. Mainly because I don't like the aesthetic of the bases that the planes come with, and the idea that you're supposed to put the planes into diving or ascending stances depending on their advantage or disadvantage at that state of play in the game. So I do quite like the Air Raid 3646 rules, but I much prefer lacquered coffins, because lacquered coffins is still a very simple set of rules to learn and to play, but there is a lot more complexity in the rules. Prime example being that in Air Raid 3646 there is only one change in altitude between all the planes. There's only one difference in altitude level, and that in itself is only played in the advanced rules. So in the basic game all the planes are at the same altitude, and to my mind that really negates a lot of the complexities of playing an aerial combat game, because altitude obviously a key factor in the games and the advantage that one plane might have over another and so on, and the adjustments to speed that apply when you either climb or descend. So I think it's very important to have those, rules dealing with altitude in a set of war games rules for aerial combat, and they're missing in RA36. So I am going to continue in acquiring and painting up 1/200th scale models for the Pacific Theatre, but I'm not going to bind myself. I do like these models. I think they're the best probably out there, but I'm not going to tie myself down to getting too many more directly from Germany. I'm coming up with other solutions, and that's mainly because the rules, a bit like Blood Red Sky, determine that certain tokens and markers, and in the case of Area 3646, you have cards with card statistics that you need to play the game and so on. I want a little bit more freedom than that. I want to sort of break away from that requirement that you have to invest in all the accessories that come with games like Blood Red Skies and Air 36, and just play lacquered coffins with the minimum of accessories and so on, but obviously concentrating just on the plain models. So the various routes around that, let me go on to another set of planes that I've painted recently to show you. Okay, so one option would be to purchase models from Warlord Games in their Blood Red Skies range. That has the advantage that you're not having to pay too much money in terms of them being resin rather than metal, and you're getting them from the UK rather than from Germany, so the postage and the customs is all being avoided. The disadvantage to my mind is, well, there's a couple. The models are nowhere near as nice. So here you can see that I've painted up 3 Kates from the Blood Red Skies Val and Kate Squadron box, which is six models, 3 Kates, 3 Vals. I've put on decals from Seventh Fabian Games, and they are more or less compatible with this range, although they're meant for 1/200th scale models from Air A36. They do go on and fit, look correct on these models, but as I say, the models themselves I'm not so keen on. So just to give you a few examples of why that is so, I'm going to put up a model that I've shown you already on my previous video, which is an Air Raid 3646 Kate. Now I think you can see immediately that there is not so much a difference in size, but definitely a difference in proportion. That the wings on the Warlord model have a little bit more, they're a little bit broader, but remarkably to me, the whole body and fuselage, and I think that shows up here, is much flatter, almost looks squashed. Doesn't look right to me somehow, and I did go in a little bit in terms of my frustration with the way that the RA36-46 model had dealt with the problem of the torpedo and having to have a flying stand going up through the torpedo, which was a separate piece that had to be glued to the model. In the case of the Warlord model, the torpedo is attached to the plane to begin with, but it's ridiculously skewed to one side. It even made me doubt whether in the actual plane the torpedo was offset, but I doubted it very much, because that would have altered the flying characteristics of the plane itself. But you can see quite clearly that it wasn't intended to be the case, because there you can see one of the undercarriages underneath the torpedo, and there's no way that would have worked, because it wouldn't have been possible to retract and extend the undercarriage. So crazy, really. It's only meant to look correct when viewed at a certain angle, or not looked at or closely inspected at all. Yeah, not very happy with that at all. But a cheaper way of getting hold of models. I think in future, if I want to buy any more Kates, though, I'm going to return to RA36-46 to get them. The vowels that came in the same box, though, I'm a lot happier with. I think they're quite nice models, so I painted those up. Again, used decals from Sevens Fabian Games that fit on quite well, and no problems with these whatsoever. So I've now got another 3 dive bombers in my collection. Now, another route that I am able to go down, because I have a 3D printer, is to actually print models myself. And I've got quite excited about that, because I found a number of sources for STL files and had a fair amount of success at printing and painting up models in 1/200th scale. So let me show you some of those. Okay, first up I discovered a business called RACworks. Now they sell resin models and also STL files for models that allow you to print your own planes. And this is an example of 3 Avengers that I have printed myself and painted up, and as you can see, they are extremely nice and very well detailed, and also a plane that it's difficult to acquire. I know RA36-46 have announced that they will be bringing out an Avenger in the future. I don't think there's one available through Blood Red Skies. I might be wrong in that, but that is the point really about RACworks, that they have a wide selection of not unusual planes, but not the common ones that you get from most ranges, like Devastators and Dauntlesses and that kind of thing. The Avenger itself was a torpedo bomber. The thing that I really like about this is that these planes may or may not be carrying a torpedo, but the torpedo was housed within a bomb bay. It made the aerodynamics of the plane, it improved the aerodynamics of the plane, but it also, from the wargamer and modeller's point of view, it removes that problem that you have about the flying stand fitting through a torpedo, because in this the plane is just attached to the flying stand, through through the bomb bay. Oh, and by the way, I should have said, you probably noticed on those Blood Red Skies models I've just shown you, that I dispensed with the flying stands that come with the models and put them on these type of flying stands that I got from, I've had for some time, but I purchased them originally from TT Combat. Yeah, so in terms of decals, you then begin to have issues because the Seventh Fabian games in particular produced decals to match the Air Raid 3646 ranges, and Air Raid 3646 don't do an Avenger, so I've had to kind of cobble something together. So I've used a combination of Seventh Fabian Games decals that were intended for other models, but I've also, I don't know how well you'll see it, but there's some numbers and lettering along the sides which I actually got from through Pendragon Games. They do two different brands of decals. Can't remember either of their names at the moment, but the lettering and numbers were actually intended for 285th scale models, so they're not the correct lettering, but I don't think they look terribly out of place. And shortly I want to talk a little bit about size of insignia and markings and available decals anyway, but I had to use these numbers because they match some numbers that I have found on an illustration online, which were for an Avenger that took part in the Battle of Midway. And there were 6 Avengers actually in combat by the time of the Battle of Midway. They were just beginning to come into service. 5 of them were destroyed during the battle, so they didn't have a great deal of success, but they went on to greater success later in the war. But I really wanted them to fit in with the sort of the era between Pearl Harbor and Midway, really, is what I'm aiming for. So that's why I had to get that lettering, even though it was slightly the wrong scale. But possibly it's not as out of proportion as you might initially believe. More on that in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to show you some other planes that I printed up myself now. So this is a Douglas Devastator, again from RACworks. Again, we're back, because the torpedo is not in a bomb bay, we're back to that problem of how do you fit the flying stand through the torpedo, and they've gone for here an equally clumsy way, which is to have it going through a sort of spherical ball shape, which is difficult to conceal with painting. So it is what it is. But the thing I really like about this model is that it's an open canopy, so the crew, the pilot and the gunner at the rear are both revealed. So that's a nice little touch, I think. I'm not aware of any models, metal or resin, that you can buy that depict the canopies as open. So it's a nice little extra additional bit of character to the model. Obviously with 3D printing, once you purchase the STL files, you can print these planes over and over. So it's far and away the cheapest way of building up your fleets. But I wanted to show you the comparison between an RAC Works model and the equivalent model from Air Raid 36, and you can see that they match up quite nicely. The difference in size of the flying stand and so on make them look a little bit different, but they are very, very similar. Again, I've used 7th Fabian decals on them because the planes are so similar in proportion and so on. So definitely 3D printing is the way to go when there are files available for the models that you want to print. RACworks don't seem to have as great a range of Japanese planes as they do US planes. I'm not sure why that is necessarily, but again, that's just the way it is, so you have to accept that. Yeah, so let me show you again. I've been busy on some other printing as well. So this is a Mitsubishi Pete float plane, as you can see. Again, acquired from RACworks. Now, this model I'm particularly delighted with because I'm not aware of any metal versions of this plane, which may be because it's very difficult to cast. I don't know. It printed off without any issues whatsoever, despite the intricacies of the struts and the dual wings and the floats and so on. I've used the decals that really are limited in the availability of decals that are suitable, so I put a small number of decals that seemed appropriate that I pinched from, well, I didn't pinch them, I purchased them, but they are taken from Warlord Games Blood Red Skies decals that are actually intended for Zeros, I believe, and the red stripe on the central float is meant to go around the fuselage of a Zero, but it's just as useful to wrap it around the front of the float, and matches up with some illustrations that I've seen. This particular plane itself was used as a spotter by some of Japanese Navy ships, but principally to spot the fall of shells and so on, rather than as a scout plane seeking out enemy fleets and so on. But nevertheless, it's a very useful kind of addition to my collection, and I've got 2 others printed up ready to paint, but obviously with 3D printing you can, once you've got the files, as I said a moment ago, you can print as many as you want. So really pleased with that. Now that is all of the Pacific Theatre planes that I've got to show you, I believe. Yeah, looking at them, that is. But having realised the availability of planes for 3D printing, oh, and by the way, I've discovered another enterprise called Plane Printer, which you can actually get free downloads of some not very familiar planes, some unusual types, but you can also purchase more standard kind of plane models from them. You pay in dollars though, so presumably they're based in America. But by becoming a Patreon, and you don't actually, there are 2 levels of patronage, if that's the right word, but the lower level you don't actually pay any money, but they still send you free downloads occasionally. About one, I'm getting them sort of fairly regularly, about 1 or 2 a week coming through. So always welcome to have free STL files of planes that you can print up in the future. Yeah, so having discovered all this, it then reawakened my interest in the Battle of Britain as well. So I thought I would purchase some models for the Battle of Britain. So far I've purchased 1 which is for the ME109. So let me show you that. This is a 1/200th scale ME109 from RACworks, and I sort of printed it out and painted it just to see what it looked like, but all the models I already have are 1/300th scale, so I didn't invest a great deal of time or effort in it. And in particular, I've applied decals to it rather than send off to Sevens Fabian Games to get some specific 1/200th scale decals that would go on an ME109. I've just really slapped on some that are not the correct scale again, so the crosses are a little bit large, but they're intended for 1/144 scale models. But again, as I said a moment ago, I'm going to come back to this whole issue of the size and of insignia and so on. I want to talk a little bit about that shortly. So they're not as out of place as it might appear at first glance. But the thing I was really interested in doing was scaling down the files and printing off some ME109s in 1/300th scale, because most, I think in fact all of the models that I had originally for the Battle of Britain, I got from the Plastic Soldier Company's grab bag deals, but they came without ME109s. So a couple of years ago when I purchased those, I was lacking ME109 models, so I wanted to see how they printed up in a smaller scale. So let me show you that next. And the answer is they printed out absolutely beautifully. The one issue that you have is that the hole that accommodates the flying stand underneath the fuselage obviously shrinks along with the model, and you have to grind down the tip of the flying stand in order for it to fit into the hole underneath the model. It's not a big problem. I used a model drill which has a sort of grinder attachment, and it was very simple matter just to grind it down to size. So my original solution to this problem of the lack of ME109s was to buy some printed models from Butler's Printed Models. So here is one of them in the front there, and you can see very compatible. You would hardly notice a difference from the distance, but when you actually get close in, you can see that this model, don't know whether I'll be able to get it in focus close enough in, but this model has a lot more detail on it. Look, for example, at the machine guns facing forward on the wings, which you might or might not be able to see. The Butler's Printed model lacks that detail altogether, and lots more surface detail on these 3D printed models that I'm printing myself. And even more pleasing was the fact that in my previous iterations of ME109s, I used decals from Butler's Printed Models as well, which are very limited in terms of their scope. They really just do the Balkan crosses, don't even do swastikas, certainly don't do which are on the tails of the planes. Again, might not be able to get it close enough into focus to see, but they certainly don't do numbers and lettering and so on. All of these 8 planes that I printed up myself here are adorned with a whole variety of decals got from Pendraken, through Pendraken. So really went to town You can even get, nose art and decals that fit under the canopies, as well as different letters denoting the squadrons and so on that the planes, the fighting groups, the Jagdgeschwader, that the planes belong to. So the coloration and numeration would change depending on what units they belong to. Let me see how much I can. No, it's not gonna focus in at all. That's about the limit of it. Yeah, so away I go then with 1/300th scale Wargaming for the Battle of Britain again. So, been printing up some terrain for that. Okay, now Brigade Models, which is the UK company, not to be confused with Brigade Games, which is the American company. Brigade Models actually market a small number of STL files for 6mm. Most of them are kind of fantasy type aeronef sort of buildings, but they do some that are historically accurate and suitable for the Battle of Britain. At the back here you can see some transmitter towers. So all of these models that you see now I printed off in what I think is 3mm scale, and they're intended to be objectives or targets during games. So you've got some transmitter, radar chain home transmitters there, and some receiver aerials. They're on tiles that I actually use, that I've got in my collection from Nazhevitz Model Bauer. So the towers themselves, all the Brigade models don't come on bases, and I found they are quite difficult to remove from the printing plate without breaking them. So I actually printed them attached to terrain tiles from Nazhevitz Model Bauer, so that the tiles themselves were much easier to remove using a sort of scalpel type tool. They come off very easily. In front of the transmitter towers, and by the way, it was very odd. I couldn't quite work out the technicalities of it, but you can probably see some bunkers there which have turned out to be submerged into the ground, which I didn't think was totally inappropriate. But in fact, the way I planned the files was that they were almost floating in the air and yet still submerged. Same with these buildings in front here. But anyway, I have some aircraft hangars, which are from, I believe, from Nazhevitz Model Bau, might be wrong. Again, printed on the tiles from Nazhevitz Model Bau, which I reduced in size. Then you have an aircraft control tower, which is definitely WW2. And then some more buildings here from Brigade Models, which is basically some administrative and accommodation buildings. So lots of Nissen huts and a barracks in the centre there. So they're all going to serve as objectives and targets and so on. The issue I'm now having, still haven't quite worked out what I'm going to do, is that I've purchased 3 terrain mats. One of them you've seen already in a bat rep I did about a month ago, which is the Pacific Atoll of Midway. None of these are suitable for that anyway, and it has buildings denoted on that mat anyway. which I can use airstrips and so on, and hangers, which I can just use as targets anyway, so there isn't a problem. But one of the problems I'm finding with the other mats, one of them is a sort of aerial, suitable for countryside, in the sort of southeast of England, so it's suitable for the Battle of Britain, but it's at a much smaller scale. 3mm scale is about as low as you can get without having real problems printing these things up. So they don't look quite right when you put them down on a mat that is a much smaller scale. So I may have to use these in games where I'm just playing on a surface which is this kind of green, featureless playing surface, which is a bit of a shame, because I do really like these flying mats, these aerial combat mats that I've got. The other mat that I purchased is I got the last one, the countryside one, from Deep Cut Studios. Really pleased with it. I've also purchased one of the Pearl Harbor, which I got from Tiny Terrain. Now, that I got hexed because I was originally intending to use the Wolves ARA 3646. Not so sure about it. I mean, it's a reasonable mat, sort of not perfectly happy with it, but I'm happy with it, and I will be playing on it because I intend to try and reenact the raid on Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor. But I do find that I've always found this Tiny Terrain's a little bit kind of odd. They have a sort of strange relationship with. They're thinking they have a strange thought process, as it seems to me, about scale and proportion and so on. And the map that they sell of Pearl Harbor is available in a whole number of sizes, but whatever the size and proportion, the dimensions of the mat you buy, they will print the same image onto it. So obviously, if you buy a mat that is 6 foot by 4, it's going to have to be stretched if you then print it on a mat which is 10 foot by 4. So I've bought a 10 foot by 4 mat, but everything is elongated in one direction. Now, for aerial combat, that's not so much of a problem. It makes it look as though you are looking from the air, but looking at an angle, a sort of glancing angle down on the features below. Works fine for an aerial combat game, so I haven't got an issue with it. Had it been a map of, say, I don't know, I think they do one of Waterloo or something like that. If they stretch the whole dimensions of the Waterloo map in that manner, it's going to look very odd indeed if you're playing with figures actually represented as being on the ground. Doesn't matter so much or at all when you've got models that are meant to be represented flying in the air, so detached from the ground. It's not such a problem, but very odd. They have another mat. This is Tiny Terrains. They have another mat which is of the White Cliffs of Dover. So you would think, aha, perfect for Battle of Britain. But when you actually look at it, it's an aerial photograph of the modern kind of landscape of the White Cliffs of Dover. So I'll be trying to put up some images I captured from the internet to demonstrate this, but it shows you modern road systems, so slip roads and roundabouts and things, which I'm sure weren't there during the Battle of Britain. So very, as I say, they have some sort of thought processes that I can never quite get my head around with Tiny Terrain. Then the mats themselves are nice enough, but there's just something awry there. So of the mats that I purchased, that is my least favourite one, definitely. And as I say, I'm having to sort of think of ways around this whole business about how you put down three-dimensional objects onto a table, get them to match in with the surface that you've got, the playing mat that you've got, but also then try and move planes around them and purchasing them on on three-dimensional objects where they're not going to be as stably they're not going to sit so stably as they would do on an entirely flat mat. But anyway, it's not a big issue. So next up then, I think I'm probably going to have to recharge the battery on my camera before I carry on. But I want to continue this video talking about decals and insignia. So that's going to be the next part of the video. Okay, next I want to talk a little bit about decals and their availability, and insignia and markings on planes in general, and how you choose to describe them on your models. Okay, so before I do that though, just wanted to say been recharging the battery overnight in the camera, and in that interval between previous filming and this, I've purchased off of the plane printer website 3 sets of STL files for Japanese planes, one for a Zero, one for a Val, and one for a Kate, and paid $15, so that translates into £13.65 at the current exchange rates. But I now have files I can print off any number of planes, and should be showing you the files at the moment, and you'll see they are very detailed, look very good, and I've printed one off so far. It's still on the print plate inside the printer. I'll take it off this evening when it's not quite such bright sunlight, but it does look as though it's printed perfectly successfully. Had to give it supports obviously, but that hasn't been a problem as far as I can see. So clearly that's the way for me to go. The prints are almost as good as the Air Raid 3646 models, and clearly they're going to be a lot cheaper and don't come with all the encumbrances of cards, tokens, markers, all that kind of thing that come with the actual game, are associated with the game and the rules, because I'm not going to be playing those rules anyway. Similar thing applies to the Blood Red Skies models, only they are a little bit cheaper. My feeling is that the prints that I've been printing off so far are of better quality than the Blood Red Skies models. But as I say, similarly with Blood Red Skies, you buy the model, but you're also paying for tokens and cards and all kinds of clutter that you don't need if you're not going to be playing the rules. So 3D printing is clearly the way I've got to go. Okay, so here in front of you now you can see lots of decals that I've purchased a couple of years ago for the 1/300 scale models from Butler's Printed Models, so all these ones here, and some that I've purchased recently for the 1/200 scale models, and also as I said earlier, bought quite a lot from Pendraken. The 2 ranges I can tell you now of decals that they sell are Scale Specialities, I-94 Enterprises, made in the USA, and the other one is Decal Details, which is now owned by that same company, but sold through Pendragon. These look very familiar, and I'm sure I have obtained some of these decals, not airplane insignia, but armoured vehicles from Tumbling Dice, if I remember. But anyway, so there's those, and these are in two scales, 1/200th and 1/300th, roughly. As I said earlier, that ME109 that I put decals on, these are from here somewhere, but they're intended for 1/144th scale. Now, this is what I wanted to start really, is by saying my attitude is not to get too hung up on matching size exactly and taking the manufacturer of the decals depiction of the scale as being the literal truth. So I wanted to show you first of all a photograph, or a couple of photographs in this book here. It's one of my favourite books about aerial warfare, Len Daytons Fighter, The True Story of the Battle of Britain. Came out around, published around 1976. This is this dates back to that time, 1977. I can remember where I was and what I was doing when I purchased this book, and how much I enjoyed reading it, and have subsequently reread it on several occasions. But a couple of pictures I wanted to bring to your attention here. Here is a picture of a Messerschmitt that was captured, was shot down, and it was shipped across to America as a kind of way of, sort of, not fundraising exactly, propaganda exercise is how they describe it here. But look how large that Balkan Cross looms on the side of the fuselage. It's not drastically different. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. It's not massively different from the size of that decal there, except, well, which is my point really, that decal is not the appropriate scale supposedly for this model. It's a 1/200th scale model with a 1/144 scale decal on it. So there's a 75% sort of difference in the two supposed scales. It doesn't look out of place. So that's the sort of thing that doesn't really worry me. Even more remarkable, look at this picture here on the next page, and this is a sort of top-down picture of some Dorniers in flight over southeast England, and you've got two planes here where the Balkan crosses are relatively small in relation to the size of the wing, and another plane here where the crosses are absolutely massive. They take up virtually the entire breadth of the wing. And now, is it breadth or depth? I suppose it's depth. That isn't a result of different perspective. You can see no matter what difference in altitude those two planes are, the cross clearly occupies a greater area of the wing than it does on that plane there. So markings varied, dramatically. Even contemporary planes and contemporary markings vary dramatically. So just reinforces my approach, which is not to get too hung up on it. One thing though that does, I must admit, I am more prone to getting anxious about, is the more decals you put on a plane, the more you make specific all kinds of things, right down to the unit that the plane belonged to. In case of carrier aircraft, the carrier that it took off from, which particular pilot was flying the plane. So you can see in this textbook here, there's a black and white illustration of a Zero fighter model 21. Unit insignia D2 was used during the period December 1941 to May 1942. So doesn't actually, that's from the Shoho fighter squadron, but it doesn't actually state there, but there are quite a lot of planes here. It's typical that I'm probably not going to be able to find one straight away, but there are quite a lot of the illustrations in here that make specific the actual pilot that was flying the plane. Well, here's one, another model 21-0, plane flown by pilot officer 1C Hiroroshi Nishizawa. So this is what I mean. The more decals you put on a plane, the more you are going to make it, you're going to hone in on a particular period, particular pilot even. So that is certainly the case with a lot of these models where you've got more and more markings and so on, colorations to put on the plane. I wanted to find, I probably lost it in this jumble that I created now. I think prepared this very well, have I? I'm looking for the sheet that I took these decals from, and I think it's this one here, but unfortunately I've cut away I've actually cut away the title of the page, telling me which aircraft carrier that's supposed to be from. Let me just stop the camera for a moment, see if I can find it. Okay, I've switched the planes around. I think I've lost that description, so I wanted to show you this plane here, and these are the sole remaining decals I've got from that set now, because I've put them on 5 models of a Val so far. But these are the decals for 1/200 scale D3A Val for the Soryu of the Imperial Japanese Navy. So the Soryu was one of the Japanese aircraft carriers. Does that mean then that I'm only ever going to be able to fly that plane as though it was flying off of the Soryu, and the Soryu was sunk at one of the aircraft carriers sunk at the Battle of Midway? No, for all types of reasons it doesn't. Again, you've got to adopt a kind of fairly carefree attitude and just say that the markings on it are typical of a Japanese dive bomber of the Second World War. Not get too worried about mixing up planes or flying them at a particular time. Particular time that may not be appropriate for the carrier Soryu. So you might be trying to recreate a conflict that took place in 1943 after the carrier was sunk. Why can you do that? Well, let me again refer you to another book, another one of my favourites, Shattered Sword by Parshan and Tully, full of absolutely wonderful detail, but written in a very readable way, so you never get tired of reading this book. But there's an appendix in here, Appendix 7, Japanese aircraft tail codes at the Battle of Midway. Now he goes. They begin by explaining the how the identification codes worked. Okay, so Japanese carrier aircraft were identified by means of alphanumeric codes painted on their tails. The first 2 or 3 characters indicated the carrier, division, and carrier to which the aircraft belonged. For example, Carrier Division 1 was designated by the prefix letter A, with the flagship Akagi's aircraft being A1 and Kaga's being A2. Ships in Carrier Division 2 carried B1 and B2. So this has got B1. You probably can't see that. Just take my word. So that means it came from this aircraft comes from Carrier Division 2. Following the divisional prefix on the tail was a 3-digit suffix indicating the aircraft type. Planes beginning with 1 were fighters, 2 were dive bombers, and 3 were carrier attack torpedo aircraft. This has got a 3-digit number beginning with a 2, means it's a dive bomber, and indeed it is. Likewise, the rear fuselage of the aircraft was painted with vertical bands just in front of the tail to indicate the mother carrier and its place within the carrier division. So that's got a single blue vertical band. And it says in the book here, a single red band around the fuselage meant the lead carrier in Carrier Division 1, Akagi, whereas 2 red bands meant the second carrier, Kaga. A single blue stripe meant the lead carrier in Carrier Division 2, whereas a single white stripe designated the lead carrier in Carrier Division 5, and so on. Okay, so why doesn't he actually say Soryu? Reason for that, as he goes on to explain, is... Right, he says, here's where things get complicated. At the time of the Pearl Harbor attack, Soryu was the flagship of Carrier Division 2. As such, her aircraft were designated B1 and Hiryu's B2. As would be expected, Soryu's aircraft carried a single blue fuselage band, so that conforms with the way 7th Fabian Games have decided to describe their fuselages. But here's the catch. However, in late April 1942, Admiral Yamaguchi, commander of Carrier Division 2, switched his flag to Hiryu. The reasons for doing so are obvious. Hiryu was newer and had a much larger island and better command facilities. According to the conventional wisdom, Carrier Division 2's aircraft designations should have been reversed as a result of this switch, with Hiryu's aircraft marked B1 and those of Soryu B2, along with corresponding changes in the fuselage bands. However, it is not entirely clear whether this was actually done. The reasons why it's not clear whether it's done is that there was very limited time because the carriers were out on other operations in that intervening period between Pearl Harbor and the Battle of Midway. There might not have been time to do it. And also, the point that the authors make is that it was the Naval Ministry that was theoretically responsible for designating the relative status of the ships within the division, not the actual commanders, on the ground, but in the water on board those ships at the time. So was the change made? Technically, should it have been made, or was it down to the Naval Ministry to make that change or not? You're beginning to get doubts brought in there. And also, the final paragraph says, as to the tower codes assigned to individual pilots, they are not nearly as well known at Midway as they were during the Pearl Harbor operations. In fact, most of the known codes are simply extrapolated from the known codes used by Pearl Harbor pilots who were still present on the same carriers 6 months later, such as Agusa Takashige's famous Soryu number 231 dive bomber. Oh, that's interesting. What number have I got on here? No, I haven't got I've got 225. Okay, probably I've got 231 on one of the planes already. Unless it's on this one here. No, it's not. Even this carries with it an element of risk in that it assumes that these pilots would not have been assigned to new aircraft or shot aboard their ships in the interim. This matter is further complicated by the fact that in some cases replacement aircraft were numbered identically with aircraft that had been lost previously. As a result, in most cases, the Midway aircraft tail codes are simply not known. Inquiries to knowledgeable Japanese sources revealed that a comprehensive set of these tail codes does not appear to exist in Japanese. So really the message is, don't get hung up. Don't allow the rivet counters of this world to say, oh, you can't do that because that plane never flew at that date or never flew alongside that date, or that pilot had been killed by, whatever. Just put them on. It makes the aircraft look attractive, and don't get hung up on the granularity of the detail. They're nice decals. They're going to get put on my aircraft, but it's not going to worry me if I put them, if I mix them up and put them, have them flying off different aircraft carrier or whatever. Okay, nearly finished now then. So I just wanted to show you a few additional books that I've got since the last update I gave you on aerial combat wargaming. Okay, very briefly, I've just acquired a few more books since last spoke to you on this subject. This one I got from Naval and Military Press, which is a book on the subject of the A6M0. Very nice colour illustrations in here, mainly I think of models and modelers depictions, so intended more for kit builders and so on, but you can still take care in how you paint up 1/200 and 1/300 scale models, so lots of inspirational work in here. Enough on that one. And also from Naval and Military Press I purchased this book here, Ultimate Allied Fighters of the Second World War. So this really fits into that theme from Air Raid 3646 of the kind of more advanced aircraft that were being contemplated and planned for, that possibly never got to see action but might well have done had the war continued, and the sort of plans weren't discontinued once the war was over. So a certain amount of inspiration to be got from that. Not much colour in this book though, mainly black and white drawings such as this with details of the individual planned aircraft. And finally, my usual tours around charity bookshops. I found this week, £1. Thought it was worth picking up. It's a book about not the Second World War specifically, but about biplanes. Well, it's a cover biplanes, triplanes, and seaplanes. So it covers the First World War as well, and I think may even have post Second World War aircraft in here too. But I thought it was worth picking up for a quid. And that's it. That's the end of my long upload on the subject of my progress in World War II aerial combat wargaming. There's definitely going to be more on this subject. Probably the next thing I'll do is another battle report using lacquered coffins, walls. That will come up in the next week or so, I would imagine. Thanks very much for watching, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.